On this vote, the yeas are 211, the nays are 210. The previous question is ordered.
I got to correct something real quick.
Please.
So it's being reported that House Republicans unanimously voted to block the release of the Epstein files, and I want to straighten out the record right now. That is not true. If I could vote, okay. If I could vote to release the Epstein files, guys, you would have my vote. I would vote yes. Here's what just happened. It was a procedural vote, and we have these all the time. It's called a PQ. It's voting on the previous question. And if the Democrats had won the previous question, which I know sounds insane, it's one of these crazy rules in the House that are hard to understand, that means they would control the House floor. And that means they could bring up anything. They could bring up impeachment articles against President Trump. They could bring up a whole package of insane Democrat agenda items and force votes on the House floor on these things. That's what we voted against. We never allowed Democrats to have control of the House floor because we control the House floor.
Yes.
So it's a misunderstanding, and I just wanted to straighten that out.
So I want to clear the air today on some of this recent Epstein stuff, because while on one hand, there's obviously a lot of valid criticism to be had of the Trump administration and Republicans in terms of how this has been handled, I think on the other hand, it's worth noting there is simply a lot of bad faith, opportunistic, disingenuous stupidity coming here from the same exact Democrat Party who did nothing about declassifying any of this for several years, but then now suddenly are pretending to be the biggest moral crusading grandstanders about releasing the Epstein files. And of course, the big lie you probably heard today being spread around everywhere is this idea that House Republicans just voted unanimously to block the release of the Epstein files, which, as we explained in the opening clip even, is simply not true. That is not what happened. As a matter of fact, this was a stupid, ridiculous, performative stunt by Democrat Ro Khanna to essentially abuse parliamentary procedures so that they could pretend to create that narrative and assume that the American people would not actually look into what happened here. So we'll discuss that. We'll debunk that here today, as well as address the greater fight here for finding that supposed Epstein client list, because apparently, according to some within the administration, as well as a recent Freedom of Information Act request, the FBI is claiming that they're still looking for these things. But I think notably here, right, I want to reiterate my stance from the beginning on the Epstein stuff has never been that there is some type of client list just sitting there in the Southern District of New York that Pam Bondi and Trump are refusing to declassify because of a cover-up. I've never believed it was that simple. Rather, I would argue that if you really think there was a grand conspiracy theory here that involved many of the world's most powerful people, you cannot simultaneously assume that they're going to be so stupid as to just write all of that down and leave it all behind, right? I think that if there was this type of client list, it likely was destroyed. If not in the beginning, then a lot of that evidence was probably destroyed or otherwise hidden in the past several years. And essentially, right, I think if you truly want to get to the bottom of this, it's not about declassifying some stuff. I think that Bondi and many in MAGA just basically misspoke or, jumped their own horses, got ahead of themselves when they were saying that, oh, we're going to find this client list and it's going to solve everything. People are going to be in jail. No, that was never going to be the case. However, if you do want to get to the bottom of this, I think what you have to do is firstly, if it's even possible, if anything is still out there that can be provable, probably launch a new investigation, get a special counsel to the bottom of all of it, etc. But with that in mind, there is one interesting piece of information that Roger Stone came on our show actually over the weekend, and now you're hearing more talk about that maybe should be brought to light, which is not that this is so supposed client list in the FBI building, but rather the sworn affidavits and original grand jury indictment of Jeffrey Epstein. And why is that necessary, or why is that important or interesting? Because these are the very documents that brought Jeffrey Epstein to trial to begin with. These include things from accusers that, hey, maybe they're true, maybe they're not. They're sworn under oath, but that could be a little bit something that could point you a little closer to potentially having something like a client list or a greater idea of what happened here. However, what's worth noting is that Alan Dershowitz just this week came out and noted that it is not the Trump administration that is hiding this one piece of information that might actually show something in the so-called Epstein Epstein files. Rather, it is judges apparently arguing that we need to protect privacy and all this stuff. So this is a very interesting dynamic. I also want to give you an update on, so we'll get into all of it in today's video. Again, not, in any ways defending or downplaying the administration's blunder on this, because very critical. I think that Bondi definitely basically hyped up something she could not deliver. But at the same time, I think it's important to share the truth about these things, not just give into some type of political wave of grandstanding or, pretending to be the most purity spiral person on this issue, when in reality, no, we have to bring you the truth of what's actually happening here. And it's not as simple as Trump and the whole Republican Party are all in on the cover up and that's it and that's over. And it's never vote in politics, never be involved ever again. So we'll get into it. First though, folks, as usual, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you are new. Subscribing to the channel is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so let's of course start with this whole headline you heard all over the place, right? House Republicans have voted to block the release of the Epstein files. How could they do that, right? The rhinos, they're all unanimously. How could this happen? Even the Freedom Caucus, right? Well, what actually happened here is that this was an amendment that was attached to a Genius Act, right? This is a bill introduced today in Congress, voted on. That is a cryptocurrency bill involving with, some people criticize it. They claim it enables CBDCs, right? Central bank digital currency. That's not even really all that relevant to this video. Just understand, we had a bill about cryptocurrency being voted on right now in Congress. And what did Representative Ro Khanna do? He tried to add an amendment in this bill that would petition for the release of the Epstein files. Now, already you're probably thinking to yourself, why would you introduce an amendment to a bill about cryptocurrency on the Epstein files? That doesn't really seem all that cohesive. It doesn't seem that related. We're not even talking about one of these, reconciliation packages, omnibus things like Big Beautiful Bill. So what is the point of that? Well, the answer is, of course, why? Because this was a performative stunt, as Anna Paulina Luna points out here. This is not true. This was a procedural vote. Yes, it was parliamentary that failed. It would have turned over the House to the Democrat Party, right? Basically, it would give them full control to amend the bill, debate the bill, all of this stuff. That obviously did not succeed because Republicans have control of the House of Representatives. They can decide what bills, get introduced and voted on and passed and all that stuff in the chamber here. And essentially, right, what Ro Khanna said is, oh, you're not turning over control of the House to the Democrats? You're not giving into my stupid political stunt to have open amendments to your bill about cryptocurrency? Therefore, you voted against the release of the Epstein files. See how that kind of works? See how this all goes, right? As you can see here, right? Recent Democrat effort to release the Epstein files. Democrats in the House of Representatives have introduced an amendment aimed at forcing the release of all files. Note also, all files is different than saying release maybe the client list or something. Okay, there's another aspect of this that's frankly ridiculous, but this amendment was proposed by Representative Ro Khanna and was attached to the Genius Act, which is a cryptocurrency bill. What does cryptocurrency have to do with Epstein? Absolutely nothing, because it was, of course, performative. What's also worth noting here too, by the way, guys. So I explained it, Marjorie in the beginning, all that stuff. But what the Khanna amendment here called for was not a specific release of certain information or known associates or potential other, people implicated here. What it called for, this absolute weirdo and creep, I don't know why he wants this, is the full release of everything indiscriminately of that what's in the Epstein files. That, of course, includes two notable things. The names and identities of the victims who have been rightfully kept private for a reason. Okay, those are obviously not something that should be unveiled and have them live through that trauma ever again, right? And secondly, as has been well documented, they've talked about many times, actual CP, right? The abbreviation there is child you-know-what in these files. Apparently, Ro Khanna, as we'll show you here today, is perfectly fine with all of that being released. That's what he's demanding. So let's also be clear about that, right? When they say release the Epstein files, they're not saying what we're saying. They're not saying, oh, we want to try to get to the bottom of did he have any associates and who were they? Can we find stuff on these people? No, they're just saying release all of it. There is a difference there. So as you can see, right, this amendment by Khanna of California says the Attorney General shall retain, preserve, and compile any records or evidence related to any investigation, prosecution, or incarceration of Jeffrey Epstein, notably any, that includes CP. That's what these Democrats are trying to, release today. So despite all of their hype about how, the Republicans did this, all that, I don't know why the Republicans are not turning around saying, why did you not even try to add a provision to this amendment saying we're not going to release literal child blank, you know what, right? CP? That seems pretty common sense, but again, anyways, not later than 30 days after the enactment of this act, the Attorney General shall release and publish any records or evidence related to any investigation, prosecution, or incarceration of Jeffrey Epstein on a publicly accessible website. Any records, any evidence. Okay, well, it seems like there should be a little bit of discernment, I guess, on which to release, but no, apparently not. Of course, this is just the pure performance art that we saw here today, and I think it really is summed up right here, the acts here by the Democrats, by this recent side-by-side from Sunny Hostin of The View in terms of how she was speaking about the Epstein stuff in 2024 versus now 2025. And look, on one hand, I guess it is true, the Trump administration set themselves up with this because obviously, people in MAGA hyped this stuff up for years. On the other hand, it's worth noting, though, that this is pure ridiculous political opportunism. Take a listen here for yourself.
People were dying for this information. There was some sort of list that everybody thought was going to come out, and who's on the list? What's important for us to note is we shouldn't be repeating names that are on the list, because just because your name has not on the list, but in the documents, just because your name is on the documents doesn't mean that you have done anything criminally irresponsible or illegal or civilly irresponsible.
Or that you were a client.
Or that you were a client.
Right.
These documents, as I read them, only reflect Epstein's sexual assaults of women and his sexual behavior. So I think that...
And Ghislaine also?
And Ghislaine. And so being named in this suit does not equate to being accused of wrongdoing. And I think that is extremely important because conspiracy theorists seem to not understand or enjoy facts.
Yes.
These are the facts.
There is a list. Trump's name is on the logs, the passenger logs of Epstein's aircraft at least 7 times. That's already been made public. I mean, of course, Trump is denying any and all allegations, but all of that information is out there. Why not just put it to rest and say, release the list?
I mean, it's just so shameless, right? 1 year ago, they were making the argument that, hey, we can't just release all potential names because that would be defamatory or slanderous to the people who maybe knew Jeffrey Epstein in some capacity, but there was never any proof of criminal wrongdoing, and there was not necessarily a list per se. And then 1 year later, Donald Trump released the list, but he's probably on it, therefore, okay, we understand, right, what is going on here. But in reality, of course, as I've been saying since the beginning, I think this issue is a lot more complicated than perhaps even people on both sides for varying reasons have made it throughout the years, right? I once again will reiterate, I don't think there's a list per se. So when they say, at least on the surface, that, hey, there's not really much else for us to declassify besides things that either are not substantiated for certain reasons or, involve things like CP that we simply can't release, I actually don't find that to be necessarily unbelievable. I think, again, what you need in some capacity if you want to try to relitigate this issue is a new special counsel, right? I don't understand how people somehow believe that the compromised FBI of the late 2010s and early 2020s somehow really got to the bottom of this if there was really something going on. But with that in mind, I think it is interesting here to also note that in contrast to the reporting out of Axios just a couple of weeks ago, that was stating they were done with the Epstein files for good, no further releases. Apparently, according to federal court filings from the Judicial Watch Freedom of Information Act request, is showing that the DOJ and FBI are still searching for the Epstein files, and the client list there is still ongoing. Apparently, according to this post, Axios leaked an unofficial and unresolved internal memo in an attempt to damage Trump, but they will ultimately fail. Now, that said, I am not here, okay, because like I've been saying, I'm not sure that type of evidence exists. I'm not here to tell you that, oh, don't worry, just give it a couple months and then people are going to start going to jail. Okay, I'm not saying that. What I am pointing out to you is, there's, I guess, more nuance to this story than it simply being a cover-up or not. I think, again, as you can see in the court filing, for any and all Epstein records, the FBI has been running its initial searches and is in the process of reviewing those search results for the thing here regarding Epstein's client list. The FBI's search efforts are ongoing. The FBI does not yet have an anticipated number of documents or anticipated dates for release. So there you have it. Now, as I kind of noted here in the beginning, the one interesting piece of information that might be relevant here, not again saying that there's a list in the FBI archives, because I don't really believe that narrative, but that there could be information in the original accusations here, right? Talking about the sealed affidavits, talking about the grand jury indictment that maybe ought to be looked at there. Interestingly here, just this week, Alan Dershowitz came on Newsmax to explain it's actually not the Trump administration that is hiding this certain info in the affidavits themselves, right? Because that would not fall under purview of the FBI. That's more in the, authority of the legal system, saying here that the judges have issued orders as to why these things cannot be disclosed, and here noting that Trump and Bondi and the Justice Department are not responsible for that. Now, take this information as you will, but I found this to be a little bit interesting because, again, that's the one thing when they say release the Epstein files, that's the thing I'm curious about, truly. Is not, again, some document that people claim exists, but there's never been an acknowledgement that it does. No. What are the affidavits? What are the original accusers? What do the witnesses here say? And take a listen, because I found this to be very interesting in terms of what could really be going on with potentially, if that does exist, right, the real smoking gun of this story. So check it out.
Is the government hiding a client list or anything that the Trump administration could release tonight?
No, there is no client list. There never has been a client list. A client list suggests that Jeffrey Epstein made a list of people to whom he trafficked women. What there is a redacted FBI affidavit from accusers, and there are several of them, from accusers that accuse Jeffrey, that accuse various people of having improper sex. And that has been redacted. The names of the people accused have been blacked out. Now, of course, because I was the lawyer and I did all the investigations, I know who all these people are. I could figure out, based on everything that I saw, who Mr. X is, Mr. Y is, and Mr. Z. I can tell you right now, none of them are public figures who are currently in office. Some of them were previously in office. Some of them are dead. But there is no client list. And the redactions could be undone if you go to court. So many of the things that are being suppressed by two judges in Manhattan, and they're doing it largely to protect the alleged accusers who are, in the view of the judges, victims, even though we don't know what their actual status is. But the judges have issued orders, which is why I can't disclose things I'd love to disclose, saying that you can't disclose this information. But Pam Bondi and the Justice Department and Donald Trump are not responsible for that. I don't know of any information that they could disclose that they haven't disclosed. Now, maybe there is some, but I'm simply not aware of it. And so I think it's important to place the blame where the blame deserves to be placed. The vast majority of people who are in the files, and I know them all, I've seen all the names, the vast majority of them have already been disclosed. They're in articles all over the world. They're in books that have been written. So if we got everything, you would be shocked how few names are there that haven't already been disclosed. The media hasn't, by the way, done a good enough job in finding the people who have been disclosed in the public record. So that's that list.
So again, take that information for what it's worth. I mean, it's kind of a question of who should you and should you not believe. I'm not here to answer those questions. But according to Dershowitz, first of all, basically the federal government has declassified most of what it can, legally speaking. And the real issue here is the fact that these federal judges in New York are basically not allowing the release of these documents. Apparently, the accused in these situations are not anyone currently holding office. There are some previous office holders, but the list overall there is relatively limited. Most names have been revealed. That is interesting, right? And that, of course, does beg a very serious question for the Trump administration, which is, if that's really all true, why not just say that, right? Why not communicate that, hey, we've released what we can. You got these two judges, the affidavits there, but besides that, not much else exists. I mean, who knows, right? There's kind of this sort of back and forth problem with the messaging on this. I'm not really sure, but it is, frankly, I think, an interesting spin in this situation if that's the case. I once again reiterate here, guys. I'm not saying I don't think things happen that could implicate potentially some very powerful people. What I am saying is that I think people would be shocked to see how little evidence that these people left behind. It's the same thing as JFK. It's the same thing, right? People said for years, if we declassify these files, we're going to find everything. Watch, they're going to admit that the CIA did it, or Mossad did it, or Cuba did it, whatever. You get hints of things, maybe some potential leads in there, but nothing really. Because why? If there's a massive cover-up of something very big here, what are you going to do? Just leave that sealed in the archives for the future politics to change and all of a sudden all your crimes get unveiled? I don't think this issue, right, guys, is all that simple. However, I would very much like to find out, with being able to protect the victims to what we can, right? Find out what's in those affidavits. And so it'll be very interesting to see whether we get some type of lawsuit, I guess, in that regard. Now, last thing I would like to note here is that apparently, according to Benny Johnson here, Dan Bongino is now returning back to work, and they're promising now, saying they're working on something, quote, very important. I am gonna say here, right, that I think to an extent you have led people along enough in this regard. So if all this 180 is true now, hey, we weren't releasing Epstein stuff before, but watch, we're really now gonna get to the bottom of it. I really hope that that's actually true, right? Because if not, then it's going to be a repeat of this situation where it's Epstein Files Phase 1. Remember that binder? And then there's nothing really in that. But anyways, this is apparently, I guess, what is being said by certain sources in the FBI that after fighting it out with Bondi, they're really going to do something this time. Again, I remain a little bit skeptical of that. But take a listen, apparently, to what he is saying.
Cooler heads have prevailed here, that Dan is actually working on something very, very important. And also, everything's changed. There is a positive mood for Dan, according to my source, after further internal movement towards Epstein disclosures and transparency. Trump team is back together and locking in. That's what I was told directly by my source. But this is what else I got from another source. There are some big things happening that we may not be able to see right now, but it's been very positive. All of you in the comment section, posting on X, writing right here, letting your voice be heard in whatever way that you do that, it's worked. Further sources confirm to me there's going to be a major change in approach to the way that this Epstein file will be handled by the administration. Expect more disclosures. Very powerful people inside the admin are now pushing for special counsel. Full press briefing on Epstein findings. Important to note that this drastic change happened after our voices were heard, but also Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, and a number of other people, Charlie Kirk, really locking in and giving some tough love to the administration over this. They were met with massive roars and applause from the 7,000 gathered and could not be ignored. In short, our voices are being heard and power to the people.
Yeah, so I mean, look, the special counsel is absolutely something I agree with. I'm just saying that since the start, because again, you need a new, but also the implication there is what? Something I've been saying again here since the beginning. You need a new investigation because you don't need a special counsel if there's a client list sitting there, okay? The reason why that doesn't exist is because this is not as easy as potentially some people have been telling you for years it is. We just go declassify, everything's going to figure out. Bill Clinton's going to be in jail, all this stuff they're saying. It's not that freaking simple, right? So, but that, yes, is a positive development. I will, however, once again say, you have to remain a little bit skeptical because it's yeah, where have we heard that all before, right? So, you people can go along with this train. I'm going to be of the position, right, where I have supported Trump before this. I supported Trump after this. But on this issue of the Epstein stuff, right, I remain convinced I'm not sure what you're really going to find, right? Not saying that stuff didn't happen, but unfortunately, the reality could also be, again, enough stuff has been destroyed or hidden or otherwise just not really revealed through the years where there is not really the grounds to have this mass locking up of the global elites like people are hoping. Now, perhaps I'm wrong about that. And, obviously, anyone who's involved, you want to see brought to justice, but that is simply, I guess, the position I see it from, But anyways, believe what you will. So according to them, right, Alan Dershowitz noting it's not really a cover-up by the administration, it's a cover-up by the judges. Benny Johnson saying from his FBI sources that, hey, things really changed on Monday. Okay, I hope so, right? That'd be great, I don't know if I believe it, but okay, right? And, Democrats, of course, beating this thing to death for political purposes. It is what it is. But with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. It's an interesting discussion, so I'd love to know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.